omnipotent, omniscient being exists, right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So here's the evidence for why that such a being exists. So you'd agree with the law of excluded middle, correct?
Like, can you refresh me on what it is?
Yeah, it's just the view that for any given statement X, and if a given declarative statement X, it is either true or it is not true.
So every statement is either true. So every statement is true that?
Yes. Well, not every statement, but well, depends on how you define a statement. But if you're taking a statement to be something which is a certain given idea to be true, then yes, definitely, it would be true that every statement. Yeah.
I mean, I would probably have to like kind of. I think that in every statement we make,
That's just a fact of classical logic, right? So if you want to be illogical, then I don't know.
yeah. I mean, again, I think that like we can talk about God being something that's like past like the realm of logic. I think there's some people who argue that. I don't even know that like this idea of God would be like logically coherent. So I mean, there are just many ways. How do you define God? I think is just the best way we can.
I define God as an omnipotent, omniscient being, so he's all-powerful and all-knowing. And by all-powerful, I'm referring to the causal governance over all the possibilities, over all state of affairs that exist.
Okay, so
Yeah.
in that, I don't know that I would say that like every single claim is verifiable. Like we have the grounds to know that it is true or false.
Well,
But
that's irrelevant, right? I agree with that. Gödel's incompleteness theorem demonstrates this, right? So you have proof in mathematics which demonstrates this.
okay, so I mean, by that metric, probably I would say that if we had all information, then every statement would be either true or false. But
Wait, hold on there a second. So do you believe that simply making a universal claim presupposes knowledge of all facts of the universe?
to make an objective claim or an absolute claim, I would probably say that like would need to know that in every case it's always true.
Wait, so hold on a second. So if I say, for example, that all black men are a part of the human species, does that presuppose that I have all knowledge of the universe?
So I mean, so if you're making like some absolute claim, like say something that is true, like just fundamentally, something that is true regardless of anything. And like if we look at like, so to make an absolute claim, in my view, from the way that I perceive it, would mean that something would have to exist in reality, objective reality, the way we perceive that always.
Why is the case that the way you're perceiving it is actually reflective of the way it should be, or the way it is?
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at, though, right? So I'm just
Okay,
trying to.
so just deliver the argument and let's hear you out on this.
That's what I'm trying to do. So again, when we look outside the scope of like what humans can, I guess, grasp or like make claims on, like we like our physiological experience and our faculties of experience, our senses are what allow us to make. Oh, I should close the door, but are what allow us to make claims, right? We are limited by that experience, is what I'm saying. So to say something is absolute, we would have to have knowledge of the nature of reality, regardless of our like subjective.
Having knowledge of the nature of reality or the metaphysical structure or profile of reality does not in any way indicates whatsoever that you have to have knowledge of all the facts of reality. Okay, so we could have restricted knowledge.
Or at least that we are
this
making,
restricted, wait, hold on, give me 1 second, and then I'll just give the response. So you can have restricted knowledge in a particular.
I'm saying we can't verify our faculties of experience. Or
Wait, when you say we cannot verify this, are you saying we are unable to do such? What's the argument for this claim?
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, what's the argument that we do not possess the ability, or is it it's not possible for us to make verification of these sort of propositions?
So I guess more so to be more specific, I'm not sure of the fact that our faculties of experience are I guess, construing reality objectively or correctly.
Wait, sorry, you low-key just moved the goalpost. So the original claim was that, I'll explain to you how. You said specifically that we cannot do this, we are not able to do this. Now you're saying we're not sure of, yeah, so that's the difference. There's a difference in the claims there.
Hold on.
Gotcha, go for it.
Explain to you that by that metric, explaining that would then follow then that because I cannot do that, or I'm not sure if I can do that, I cannot be totally, absolutely sure that the claims that I'm making are absolute. That's what I'm saying. We're talking about absolute.
Do you understand? Yeah, by the way, just to be clear, when you're talking about something being unsure, like you're not sure of doing something, or it is possible for something to not be the case, or we're unable to do something, those are basically modal conceptions, okay? And by the way, facts of modality hinges on facts about logic. So if you're going to say that you're unsure of this given proposition, despite this proposition being a logically necessary fact, that would be a contradiction, conventionally speaking.
Okay, so are you like an objectivist or something?
Absolutely. It depends on if you're defining objectivist to be the view that you can verify objective facts of the universe, right? Or is there a different definition you're utilizing?
Wait, so you believe that we can verify objective facts of the universe, correct?
Yeah, that's how we verify facts of mathematics. Yeah.
On some assumption, right? Like assuming that, like, because we.
What do you think an assumption is?
Okay, can you just like, can I engage with you like genuinely? Because I'm asking you questions so I can verify what your claim is. I'm not totally like well versed on like objectivism and subjectivism. So I want to ask you these questions so we can get to a point.
Okay, shoot your shot, girl. I'm down for it.
Okay, so you recognize, or do you believe in certain sets of assumptions thus to make logical claims? Is that what you're saying, that you believe that because we must believe, right, that we can verify, like, for logic to exist, we must believe in some like objective reality?
Wait, hold on. I'm not making any ontological claim. I'm not talking about whether or not logic exists.
Okay.
All I'm saying here, I'll just clarify.
This is okay. The problem is, I'm not like, sometimes I'll say a word and I don't mean it in the way that you philosophically or logically like mean it. Like when I say that, like,
that's understandable.
I mean for logic to be coherent. So like as like a category. Okay. So are you saying?
Okay, so I'm not even talking about the coherency of logic. I'll just clarify. I'm not talking about the coherency of logic or whether you can understand logic or whether it exists or not. Here's the point I'm making. The point I'm making is simply that when you're going to say that you're unsure of something, these sort of claims hinges on some sort of presupposition that these sort of structures of logic is even correct to begin with for it to even make such a claim, like you're unsure of this. Because all it means to say you're unsure of something or where we are unable to do something is that there is a possibility of us not doing it, or rather there's a lack of possibility of us not doing something. However, the conception of possibility, in most cases conventionally, is construed based off logic. So something is possible if it does not go against the laws of logic. So for instance, you can't have a square circle. The reason being that it is contradictory, it goes against the second principle of logic. So with that being said, we determine possibilities, generally speaking, based off whether or not something is compatible or incompatible with the classical logic principles.
I'm sorry, but like this is what I was asking you. So that's all I was trying to say. That I was asking you that if you make some fundamental assumptions. So in the way that I characterize
those are not assumptions.
Okay, so what do you
I don't like that word right there. Okay, yeah, so you're using the.
What do you call what logic is contingent upon? Presuppositions?
Logic is contingent upon. I don't think logic is contingent upon assumptions. I think all sort of knowledge claims are going to be something which are justified, and those will not be assumptions.
Okay, so what do you define an assumption as?
An assumption is just a given proposition which is taken to be true or interpreted as true without any evidence to back it up. I think.
Oh, hold on, that's not how I define
logic. Go for it.
Okay, so I don't think that the assumption has to have like zero to no evidence. I think that there are different like levels of like how you can like quantify an assumption or like.
That's the Oxford Dictionary's definition, by the way. If you search up the word assumption.
When we talk about like philosophy.
One quick Google research.
Oh my god! Can we finish? Like, I think the problem is that one, you're being disingenuous. You're not allowing us to engage. And number two, again, like we're probably coming at this from like different terms of understanding, like different fundamental beliefs about what words mean, etc. Right? So, I mean, how do you want to define in your framework what logic means?
I want to define it based off how the scholastic English speakers would define it.
Okay. So clearly.
Sorry, excuse me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to be clear, because you talk about you wanting to engage, and I'm willing to engage, but I'm not being disingenuous. Which word do you want me to start off by defining?
Logic.
Okay, so logic, I take logic to be a tool which is utilized to make deductions about facts of the universe. So we use logic to know what the facts are. We reason about things, right?
Okay,
yes.
So you already presume us to be able to make contact with objective reality. Is that what you make that claim?
It's the tool we use to make inferences, yeah.
Okay, but you on like some meaningful reality that objectively exists.
It doesn't have to be the case that this reality is objective. Logic Logic can be a tool which exists in a world where idealism is true, whereas it is just the case that there's no objective stuff which exists. They're just mental stuff, right?
Okay,
So
so
think of like introspection. So when you introspect on like your thoughts, so give me 1 second. When you introspect on your own thoughts, for instance, like you're like making a psychological analysis on your own mental state, right? That requires logic. Even though you're making an analysis of something which is a non-objective reality, it would still be the case that logic is applicable towards the epistemic context,
got
right?
the input that I needed. So you're good. Anyway, so do you make any claims on reality being absolute?
What does that mean?
Something that exists, like
Objectively?
objectively, absolute and objective, depending on how you're approaching it, mean different things.
By objective or absolute, do you just mean something which exists independently of what either of us thinks of the matter?
Or not even just what we think, but like without any human minds, without anything, this without any, not contingent upon anything. This thing exists, I guess.
Yes, definitely. Without, I think that being would be God.
Okay, so what is this? Okay, so and how do you know?
How do I know this? I know this through the fact that denying such claim results in a contradiction, and contradictions are impossible. And so if contradictions are impossible, then it has to be the case that this proposition is true. There you go.
Based upon logic, though, right?
Absolutely. And if you deny logic, then guess what? You'd have to agree that all propositions are true.
Yeah.
Included the proposition that God exists. Wait, hold on. That's a problem, though. You can't agree with that because you said
I'm not
specifically.
agreeing to that. I'm saying that I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're essentially like, this is not like an absolute claim. You're not making an absolute claim, right? You're not making.
I'm making an absolute claim by saying that God exists. Of course I am.
Oh my God! Wow. Okay. So something being absolute, you would have to know the nature of it in the sense that like. Or you would have to know that this thing exists in the way that it does, no matter what, right?
No matter whether there's any mind or anything. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm saying that I do, in fact.
Okay.
Pardon?
Okay, so I wasn't right. So what I'm saying is like, no matter what, it's not contingent upon anything. You have to know that this thing exists. The only way that we can, I guess, interact with reality is based upon our subjective experience. It's based upon our faculties of experience, right? That's the ways that we like navigate.
Wait, hold on. Is this a means by which you're invalidating knowledge? Or are you just saying that?
I'm not invalidating knowledge. I'm trying to conceive of like what you mean by absolute and how you're interacting with it is sound and also parallel how I conceive of it.
Yeah, so I'm telling you that just because it is the case that we utilize subjective experiences to gain knowledge and make knowledge claims, that does not in any way undermine the knowledge claims we're making. We can use subjective experiences to make knowledge claims on facts which are infallible, facts which could have not been.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying, how can we know that they're absolute?
We know they're absolute based off the fact that given the conception of these things, it is entailed that a given proposition would have to be true. Okay?
Why would it have to be true?
Because of the fact that it is logically necessarily true.
Okay, it's because for logic to exist, this thing must exist. That's contingent. I'm talking about something being absolute, right? I understand that logic is a tool and it's a system, and for things to work, it's input, output, right? Again, ignore
That's
outside.
fine. Continue.
Right. So again, this is a relationship that these two things have with each other. Where something to be, you're saying if this thing is not true, logic cannot be coherent. Logic cannot exist in the way that it does. But I'm asking how we know that this thing is absolute.
Yeah, I've already answered this question. Okay, just like how we know that. Yeah, I'll explain to you how. So just like how we know, for example, like when you see a box, for example, like a box which is like sealed, just like how we know that it is either the case that there's something in this box or not, which is just a fact about logic. It just follows necessarily. It could not be something which is neither of these options. The same thing would apply here insofar as the given claims that I'm talking about are verifiable by axioms of logic, which determines mathematical principles and facts. So for it to reject my epistemology is for it to reject the whole foundation that mathematicians rely on for us to make claims about reality.
Okay, right. So again, I'm cool with science and that we assume some things about reality, that it exists, that we can touch it, that etc. Like I'm fine with making those baseline assumptions, but you're again not explaining that we know, because again, even us making contact with like, or at least like conceiving of science and us
Okay.
branding that system, it's predicated upon our like faculties of experience that are all that we have to again construe reality, to make decisions, to think, to come to conclusions, whatever. And I can grant that these things ought to give us something valuable. These things ought to mean something. I'm going to call absolute reality, something that we can touch. That's fine. But what I'm explaining is
Okay.
absolutely separate from that.
So just before I give a response to your points here, what you're telling me here, okay, is that because you make, even though you're not necessarily disagreeing with these baseline assumptions, you're saying that considering into perspective that we're utilizing their subjective faculties or subjective experiences or mental states to make these sort of discovery of these sort of like assumptions, then it is open to the possibility of them being wrong, all right? Or it could be the case that you cannot make any absolute claims, correct? That's the claim you're making, right?
No, I'm not making a claim. I'm asking you questions. I'm asking.
Okay, so you're not making any claims. You're asking me how is it the case you can ground absolute propositions or things which I claim to be absolute facts, irrespective of this thing that you've just presented on the table, which is us utilizing their subjective experiences, correct?
No. So I think that the problem is you're trying to what a lot of objectivists do is that they pigeonhole you into making like some wide sweeping claim.
I'm not saying that you're making the claim. I agree not making the claim.
I understand that you're going to say that, right? But that is the
I understand this conversation much better than you are. I'm telling you, eight steps ahead.
Totally fine. Like I totally that's totally fine. I think you are built to view these things as like gotchas, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm a genius, natural genius. Yeah.
Cool. That's great for you. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what I was saying was, again, all I'm asking is I'm inquiring how you're able to verify the thing that you're saying. I think that you don't want to accept, again, like I think that there are some baseline assumptions that are made, right? Or baseline foundations or axioms in any like belief, in any belief system, in any system in general for it to function. That's all I'm really inquiring about.
Yeah, verification. When you're talking about verification, all you're just talking about is proof or claim, right?
Proof, but again, I'm asking if there's some axioms or some assumptions.
Yeah, I believe they're axioms, but I don't believe these axioms are assumptions.
Okay, so how do you want to take them as? So you're saying that they have evidence, or what?
Of course, definitely.
Okay.
On your Bayesian model. Yeah.
Okay. So again, it's fine that if they have evidence, I guess, maybe I won't use the word assumption, but I'm saying even in taking axioms to be axioms, right? I'm saying that like they still reside, right? Even your ability to conceive of some axiom resides on your perspective, on your faculties of experience. That is the foundation from which they arise.
I'm gonna ask you this question, okay, man? Wow, your fanboys are popping up in the chat. But look, I was just gonna say one thing. I'm just gonna ask you this question.
No, can you just interact with what I just said, please?
You want to finish since you were not finished?
No, I wasn't finished. I want you to interact with the thing that I just said.
I'm interacting. What are you talking about?
No, you're not. Change the conversation.
How can you tell if I'm interacting with what you're saying? Okay, concession accepted.
Respectfully, I asked you, I positioned a question, and you said, how about we do this? And I said, no, I want you to interact with what I just said.
Okay, present what you're saying again, and I'll interact, since you're claiming I'm not interacting, okay?
Okay, cool. So I'm asking you, is it not that these axioms, that us coming to understand them, to recognize them, or to characterize them, or even to tell each other that they're axioms, right? To conceive of said axioms, we must, they're founded upon our like faculties of experience. Like, again, our sensory experience, our minds, whatever you want to call it, are what we use to even come to conceive of these axioms.
Okay, cool. Now what's the question?
Okay, so that was what I'm saying. Do you agree to that?
I agree with this. I've been saying this from the very beginning.
Okay, so if you've been saying that, and do you grant our faculties of perception as being, like the objective way or the most verifiable way to construe reality? Is that something that you believe or no?
One more time, my background drowned you out. My apologies. Go for it.
Okay. So, do you grant that like our senses or are just ways of interacting with the universe, with reality,
Yes.
are they infallible or
However, I'm
not?
not using my sense experiences to make
I'm saying,
to know these propositions.
are they infallible or not?
My sense experiences? No, they're not, but I'm not using sense experiences here. These are non-empirical claims.
I'm talking about your faculties of experience. So not just like, oh, like I feel this way, but the way that you're able to like interact with like math, the way that you're able to conceive of math.
I think our a priori intuitions could not, well, I think there are some elements or some types of a priori intuitions which are infallible. So I think it depends on the mental faculties. I think there are some mental faculties which are infallible. Those mental faculties being the types of things which has a mental acquaintance with a priori facts. And I think there are other specific mental faculties which could not be, or sorry, which could be wrong, which are things about the empirical world, about the world we experience, for example. So we could be wrong about this particular object shape, for instance, you know.
Is there a
So yeah.
human that could interact objectively, like that could just like interact objectively with objective reality? Like their faculties of experience are not misconstruing it in any way. It's just objective, like interaction with reality. Like what they're seeing is totally verified. It's the nature of it is correct. And it, as the
Yeah, this is just like a Descartes demon type objection, right? So yeah, I agree with you that you could have. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you that you are. If you're making this point, I'm agreeing with you that these sort of claims about the objective reality, quote unquote, which is observed by our senses, those claims could be wrong. I agree with that. However, I'm not making that type of claim.
Okay, but you agreed, right, that these axioms, that our ability to conceive of them or verify them or any of that, our ability to interact with even
No, because there's a distinction, right? So the claim I'm talking about is about the laws of logic, not about the sense experience type world.
Okay, so maybe you're misconstruing what I'm saying. Because when I say faculties of experience, I mean the means that we use to interact with and understand things like logic and math. The very thing that we're trying to verify and understand the nature of.
Okay, look, I'm gonna start getting serious. Look, all I'm saying here simply that the claim I'm talking about here is about the laws of logic. I'm saying that the LEM, which is that for any proposition that it's either true or false, that could not be wrong. However, there are other claims that we make which utilizes our mental faculties, which could be wrong. So you're conflating claims which could be wrong, like empirical claims, and claims which could have not been wrong, like non-empirical claims about logic and mathematics.
Yeah, sorry, I was reading the comments. Either way,
That's fine. I can repeat myself.
yeah, I just honestly feel like you're not tracking. When I say, if you already agreed that our like ability to conceive of these axioms, understand these axioms, recognize them, whatever, all of that comes from these faculties of experience, and then you then say that like the way that I'm explaining them is not relevant to your point, and that's where I'm starting to feel like we're having some disconnect. And what I mean when I say faculty of experience, can you understand?
I want to clarify something for you and the rest of the audience who's not understanding. I'm not saying you're not understanding per se, but just to clarify, okay? I understand where you're coming from. You're asking me specifically, is it the case that my mental faculties about these axioms, about the laws of logic, could these mental faculties, which are subjective, could they be wrong? Now, I'm telling you that in the particular case of logic, no, they can't be wrong. However, in other cases, they can be wrong. The reason being,
logic, they cannot be wrong.
Pardon? Excuse me?
In regards to logic, they cannot be wrong.
No, they cannot be wrong.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for logic to work, they cannot be wrong, essentially. Do you?
I'm not talking about the functionality of logic. I'm saying specifically Okay, so I'm saying, I don't know what that means. I'm going to focus on the original point you've mentioned. You asked me the original question you've asked me specifically. Is it the case? Give me 1 second and I'll give you time to respond. Okay? You asked me specifically.
I feel like again, you're saying that something like that question is incoherent, or like you wouldn't like fathom why I could ask that question when I'm trying to understand the nature of the claim that you're making, right? So
I'm not saying I can't fathom why you're asking this question. I'm saying that the question that you're asking has already been addressed on numerous occasions.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I'm going to be so real with you. Like, I don't know if you're actually intellectually trying to like engage, and you're trying to be like actually like.
I just did.
I mean, it doesn't feel like you are. So, and I know that I'm not crazy in saying that, but
okay. I literally just repeated your question, then responded to the question, and then you're telling me that I'm not engaging. You asked me, is it the case?
I just asked you a question about the functionality of logic. Because people will
My
display.
answer is an explicit no. They cannot be wrong. How is that not addressing your question? What are you talking
No, I
about?
asked you a question after that, though. So,
Okay, the question after that was irrelevant to any of the claims I've been making thus far,
oh
and
my
so I would not
god,
need to answer that question.
oh my god, dude, hell no. I'm sorry.